into that experience. Tonight we are talking about navigating healthcare and education and allyship. So it's very fitting tonight. And so I encourage us all to see what can we do from this moment on to not just talk about reconciliation and allyship, but actually do something. And we have the perfect person with us tonight to talk about that. Melissa Allder, thank you so much for being here. I am such a huge fan of yours. Our relationship is fairly new still, if I can call it a relationship. Might be very one-sided at this point. But yes, through the BIPOC Education Association, I have just found like so much information in such an applicable way. And that's why I'm really excited tonight for you to share your story. On one side, we're going to be talking about navigating the healthcare system as a Black woman with breast cancer. Yes, and the other thing is to talk about how to show up as an educator, as a leader, as an ally in spaces where we can actually do work to help remove oppression and remove barriers to BIPOC students or adults. So, I mean, you're so well versed in everything. I'm just gonna hand it over to you. You can share whatever you want to share. Okay. I'll give you about half an hour to chat, and then we'll do kind of an open floor.
Yeah, I will do the chat. I will chat, and then I'll ask the viewers if they have any questions, and kind of go back that way, because sometimes you forget after half an hour, and then I'll be like, what did I say 25 minutes ago? So we'll just make sure I'll definitely have people interject. I have no reservations with that. Thank you for having me. My name is Melissa Allder. I have been an educator for about 22 years, very, very long. I had an opportunity to work for 4 school boards, and one of the school boards also included in the States as well. And from those experiences, I have a lot of lived experiences as an educator, but also as a Black educator. And it's interesting for the last 2-3 years, from all the different types of readings that professional readings that are going on that discusses systemic racism, reading these books or these professional readings, I had so many aha moments. Because I've always knew you had that inkling of things happening, such as microaggressions. Now we have a term, but there were microaggressions that people of color or Black women or young Black students or Indigenous students, whomever, had known what these microaggressions were when they were young. We just didn't have a name for it. So all these opinions that I'm going to share is based on my lived experiences, based on my knowledge about education. My opinions, can be challenged. And again, I am still unlearning and unpacking how the system works. Because again, we have been, let's just say, sheltered or conditioned of how the system works, and how we all indirectly know how the system works more for some than others. So we have to be mindful of that and not be ignorant to the fact. So yeah, so thank you for being here. And again, the opinions are all my own. They're all my lived experiences. I don't mind being challenged, as I always like to be challenged, and I will challenge you as well. And again, it's coming up with this whole concept of learning and unlearning together, moving forward, and having a dialogue, because a lot of times we don't want to talk about race. We don't want to talk about anything, right? So even too, when I had an interview the other day, the reporter asked, am I allowed to call you Black? Just that concept of just like the whisper. I was like, girl, you don't have to whisper Black. You know I'm Black. But it's interesting that we're conditioned because we didn't want to be offensive. And again, it doesn't need to be. So it just shows about the conditioning of that. Because many times when we talk about the idea of, a white person being hesitant to say Black, then that means they're being hesitant to talk and have these conversations because you are uncomfortable. Right? And Black people, we're not uncomfortable being Black because we've been told we've been Black through implicit and explicit actions. So again, we are ready to really talk about it and unpack it, because we're fed up, we're mentally exhausted. And as an educator, I'm still hearing stories from students today, Black students today, still are reiterating the similar stories that I have dealt with when I was a child. And that shouldn't be happening. Right? I'm 47 years old. I should be hearing 15-year-old students dealing with the same issues. Like, come on, like that is just mind-blowing. So those are the ideas that I want to come up with. I'm not going to have one size fits all perspective. I know things are different in the city than it is in the county. That's different in Southern Ontario than Northern Ontario. We all have our challenges, but the challenges are listening to other voices, listening to perspectives, having empathy, and also checking your implicit bias. Okay, so those are the ideas, and that those strategies I believe will be applicable to wherever you go. So first things first, I don't know where I want to start because I'm going to be all over the place. I created like a little note. I'm always, you know, there you go. I didn't have Post-it, so I'll do it this way. So I'll just start off quick from my perspective with the healthcare, then it'll tie in with education. You're going to see that I'll go interchangeably between both sectors. The main element in education and healthcare, and even with policing, I believe data is the key. Canada is lacking data representation. We don't collect it, very little of it. When we hear data, a lot of the elements is from the States or from England. They collect data based on race, racial demographics. Canada doesn't. And I understand from Canada looking at it as we're Canadians, we're all one, we don't see color. And that's another issue we'll talk about probably in another chat. But I know what Canada is trying to do is trying to be inclusive. So I see what the true intention when they made those decisions probably 2, 3, 4, 5 decades ago, what have you. But obviously there are issues going on today that we need to address, because if we don't collect data, then we're going to continue the status quo. If we don't collect data, problems will still occur. If we don't collect data, we're going to be losing all the potential marginalized students and also not support marginalized people who are in healthcare, that we need to have this data. So that's one element, because just recently they did a data collect statistics with one school board, and that one school board is basically representative is probably going on with other school boards in Canada as well as in the States. So that's why it's very important with data. So coming back to data with the healthcare, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in August. I went through my journey through, had surgery, had a lumpectomy, finished 8 rounds of chemo about a month ago, and I just started radiation yesterday. So today was my second day of radiation. I have 16 sessions to go. So it's good that we are, Jenna, that we're starting now, because I know I'll be tired 2 weeks from now until I get energized. So good timing. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, the first thing I did was go on Google. I was like, because again, I've never met any other women, Black women with breast cancer. And now I'm finding out, since I have it and since I've been very vocal, now I'm hearing other journeys and similarities. And through my Instagram, I'm connecting with fabulous women across the world, Black women sharing their journey, knowing that they're not alone. And that is just, I can't even describe that. That is the most rewarding piece, to know that I'm not alone, but I'm also advocating and helping other people. So it's not even Black women in Canada. We're talking about Black women, in other countries and continents. So when I went to start funding this research, it was disconcerting due to the fact that there was very little of it. And all the research I had to find was basically in the States and in England, nothing here. And when I did find information here, very, very, very little information. So I couldn't find where I was going to be. How long was I going to live for? What information can I resonate that I can actually make some assumptions and collect some data and make some conclusion and hypothesize and all that element. I didn't have the privilege of having all that information because there wasn't enough. And so that is hard, because here I am, a single mom. I have a daughter who's 23. So again, now we're looking at generational piece. We're looking at genetics. I have 2 sisters. So again, I'm looking about not only about myself, but I'm thinking about my 2 sisters and my niece and my daughter. So the immediate family that we have, that's a concern that I have. So how am I going to advocate for myself if I don't know the research, if there isn't any research out there? So Toronto University, they have there's 3 Black doctors and professors who are doing the research, and they mentioned about the health disparities and the lack of research. And it's sad because now we're discovering from the statistics from the 2, from England and the States, Black women are getting cancer earlier. They are getting triple negative cancer, which is it's a harsher cancer in regards to the success rate and the treatment. And Black women usually get, not usually, have a higher prevalence of getting aggressive cells, a grade 3 cancer cell. So you have grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. If you have grade 1, that's good. That means your cell is very similar to the original cell, but grade 3 means it's entirely different. They're doing their own thing and what have you. I had the grade 3 cells. So I had the fast aggressive one. So then that was like, okay, what's going on there? Fast aggressive cells, grade 3, mind blowing. Where do I go? What do I do with that? And then I became the statistic that I was seeing. Then here I am in Canada, then I'm relating to the statistics that are in the States and England. That's a problem because we need to find out, we have the healthcare, we have the system, where's information that's supporting the women of color? And they even said, like for Canada, Canada has the third, Black people are the fourth largest, I believe, of visible minorities, if you want to use that term, in Canada. So why are we not representing people of color? So that is an element there. Then another element for me personally is that I'm estrogen positive, but my estrogen positive was a low estrogen positive. So people with breast cancer and whatever, they'll probably know what I mean. But low estrogen means that your cancer is fed with estrogen hormones, okay? But I was a low one. So that means then I'm close to what? The triple negative, right? Again, back to the statistics, there's very little information and I have to resort to another country just to discover where I'm at, where my doctor's at, where the health system is in Ontario or in Canada or North America. So that element was, you know, a little bit of a concern. And then they had an opportunity to do another biopsy, to retest the biopsy. And then now I'm at 30% in the 30%, but it's still low. So again, what statistics or what information, what research should we have for women, Black women, in that percentile, in that lower range, and what can we do to support them? Because is hormone therapy going to work for me? Am I going to be on toxic? I feel like I don't want to go on hormones for the next 5-10 years where it might not be applicable to me. So those are the questions that we've been actually having and discussing. So Black women, younger. So now I want all Black women, if you're listening to this, young, if you're 15, 18, you need to start checking. Don't care. And also to have conversations with your aunties, your mom, anyone who is ever around you, please have that conversation because it is, it's sad. And it's sad because again, I'm the oldest out of my sisters and I'm the first one in our family to get it. So again, what's happening in our economy, in our world, everything else, that's another piece of whatever. So we definitely have to acknowledge that. Any questions?
Yes. Well, first of all, just deep gratitude for you being here, still in the middle of this journey with the level of energy that you have is.
I made myself an iced coffee.
I am convinced that you have a twin because you'll make these posts like getting radiation and then like later you'll just be like so full of energy. And I'm just like, how is this the same human? So thank you for that. Can you talk to us about why it's important that there are different statistics for Black women versus white women or Indigenous women? In your search for statistics for yourself, you know, you wanted to find what are the outcomes going to be for me, identifying yourself as a Black woman. Can you tell us why that's important? Why are outcomes or diagnosis or experiences different for Black women in the healthcare system or with health in general and disease?
Well, history shows itself that the healthcare system wasn't equitable and did some research with the Indigenous community. Unethical research in the Jewish community, unethical research in the Black community. So again, women may be apprehensive of going and to checking themselves and what have you. But I believe representation matters. Like, for example, seeing posters of breast cancer, I rarely see women of color. So for me, when I thought of breast cancer, you know, you're supposed to think, you usually see somebody, like when you think of, you know, tennis, we think of Serena. When we think of whatever, we have these people that we are black leads, you know, are greats that we do have. We gravitate to that to have some form of connection. But then when I think about it, it's like, who was famous with breast cancer, Black woman with breast cancer? What, you know, what did she, how does she handle it? What was her challenges and everything else? So it's part of representation. And it's almost like, and it's kind of like the irony is that when people are saying all lives matter, that all lives matter, then my boobs, my black tits should matter. I'm sorry. So there you go. So if you're talking about all lives matter, then data all lives matter then should be also included in the healthcare research. And also too, if it's an element of the triple negative or the aggressive piece, then we need more research to focus on the aggressive cells. Then we need to look at, is there a connection with genetics of the African heritage, the Caribbean heritage? What is going on and what can they actually do? And also too, there's one element I think that I also noticed is that the research was also lacking. So for example, I'll read a statistic. In the recent scoping review, research surveyed over 20,000 studies of information on cervical and breast cancer in Black Canadians. Okay, remember, what did I just say? 2,000. And only 23 studies focus on the cancers of Black Canadian women. Did you hear what I just said? 23. And on top of that, the studies reported the incidence, prevalence of mortality and lack of information. So they didn't really focus on those elements as well. So that is a piece that we definitely need to look at. And that is Black women, that was found in Black women in Canada behind the number. So there is now groups trying to find data and trying to find the numbers. And also to the research, I believe that even too, when they're doing breast cancer, or when they are doing the biopsy or when they are testing, I believe that they should have the racial demographic attached to it. To also to find similarities, compare and contrast, looking at elements there. How does the body react to chemo? So they try to do the whole one size fits all. So basically everyone goes to this chemo, this, whatever, and so on. But how's my body really reacting? What kind of, why do I have grade 3 cells? What triggered that? What gene do I have? So these are all the questions that I have that I wish that researchers will look into it more. So I put a post on my Instagram post and I said, breast cancer doesn't discriminate. People do. Because if you have people doing the research, they're going to research what they know, who they know, and people that represent themselves. And then I don't want Black people or young women of all races, because now young women are prevalent to cancer. Now we're going to need to be mindful of that information. So again, we need more women at the table. We need more women making the decisions. And then we need more women of color to represent. And any white women who are making these decisions, you need to also represent Black women and Latina women, because they also said Latino women are also not studied as much as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Before I ask more questions, does anyone have a question that they want to bring up as it relates to topic? Yeah, Natalie.
Sure. I just wanted to say also, Melissa, thank you. You have shared so much knowledge already that I can't wait to, I know I have like a billion other questions, but I can't ask them all, but I really appreciate you being here. So my question actually was, and maybe you'll get to this, but so it seems obvious that it's a huge issue that there is not that data about Black Canadian women. Is there any research? I know that there wouldn't be any from Canada, but is there any research from like the US or England that shows what the actual results of that are?
I did some research and they had, they said the mortality rate, I found it somewhere that they said the mortality rate is 43% more than white women for Black women in the States. Now, the States, I have to also be mindful. The healthcare system's different, right? So we also know healthcare and socioeconomic status, where you are, also will probably determine what you can pay and what you can't pay for. So for example, I have one of my girls on Instagram, she's in Texas and she showed a bill of what her chemo treatment would be, right? If she didn't have two insurance companies that she pays into. So again, if you don't, then for myself, if I had to pay that bill, I would be in debt and there'd be things that I wouldn't be able to do. So again, I look at the statistics, and now the statistics, not just because of genetics or they have it, but is it because now Black women are taking a little bit longer to get treatment until they really see it, so they can handle it? Because are they trying to avoid it because of the cost? They can't afford it, and it costs money to see a doctor there. So again, that discrepancy as well. So yeah, and that's however, in Canada they said that's the same thing, but again it's like 23%, but again we have the healthcare to support that. I hope I answered your question.
Great. Yes, no, you really did. That's such a huge problem. It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and the bill was, I'll even say the bill, what did she say? Oh my gosh, it was for one round of chemo, I think it was like $180,000. That was her bill. That would have been the bill. Yeah. And I was like, what? Yeah. So she said 2 insurances help cover it. And she's like, this is also a problem as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's it's terrible.
It is.
Darnell, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, Melissa. You look
Hello,
fabulous.
how are you?
Oh my gosh. Wow. So I apologize, I jumped in late, but I'm just wondering if anywhere that you've done research, or from your experience as well, any discussion about the disbelief of the pain that Black women experience and how that comes into play by white doctors not believing, minimizing, that sort of thing, either from what you found or from your own experience.
Well, there's research that shows that Black people are treated differently because there's wrong. I'm trying to filter this. Sorry. They have some doctors, or there's research shows that there's a preconceived idea of preconceived notion that Black people can handle pain more or handle it different. So there's research that it does indicate that if a doctor gives drugs, they'll give, pharmaceuticals, they'll give more to white people than they do for Black people, right? So that element there. So there is research, they have done that, and that's an issue there as well. I even had a girlfriend of mine, and she's going through some health ailments, and she's talking about how her doctors are not listening to her. And from talking with me now, she's trying to advocate for herself. Because again, they were not listening. They were just ignoring her, just dismissing and what have you. And if it was somebody else, how far would they gone into their research or look into it to give her the focus that she needed? When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I have an amazing doctor. Right away when he told me that I had it, I heard him like on this computer already basically filing for me to go to St. Joe's to get a mammogram right away. He didn't wait, he didn't call me in, he just trying to get things done because he was aware of the discrepancies, the disparities are happening, because him and I will always have these conversations about what have you. So we always have these engaging conversations. And then even too, when I met with the surgeons, I even asked them. So again, I have to kind of like promote myself, advocate, and also show the difference of people of color. When I had my chemo infusions, that's when I kind of noticed there's some biases that happened or that occurred. So for example, one nurse right away wanted to get the vein finder because she couldn't find my veins, I guess, right away. Didn't even go through the whole, feeling, whatever. Right away, she made the assumption that she couldn't see them, I guess, because I'm a woman of color. I had another nurse mention that my skin was so tough. That's like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean? Oh, Then I had another nurse was trying to make, candid conversations. I don't know why, but anyways, asking me if I'm from London. Do I live in London? And I said, yeah, I live in London. And I know why they would ask that, because since, where London has an amazing treatment, and at Victoria, we do have people who drive 2-3 hours, 4 hours just to come to whatever. So we do know that. But then she wanted to follow up and ask me if I was born and raised in London. And then that's when I said, why do you need to know that? Why does that make any difference to you? Why do you want it? She goes, well, and I looked around and I was the only Black person in that chemo treatment that day of like 50, 80 people. And I said, did you ask everybody else that question? And then she's like, then she just paused and she goes, well, if you don't feel comfortable, I said, I feel comfortable in answering because whatever, but I said, I don't feel you need to know that information. Why do you need to know where I was born or raised? Why don't you just ask me what I had for lunch or what's my favorite coffee or what movie did I see or how am I handling this whole COVID pandemic during chemo? Like, so why do you need to know where I'm born and raised? How does that, like, why? Because I'm an outsider, you're determining I wasn't born in Canada. Well, I wasn't born in Canada, I was born in England, but my sisters were born in Canada, right? So again, people just make an assumption that you're not Canadian because of color of your skin. So that's, people need to check that. I hope I answered your question, Darnell.
Thank you, Darnell. This is a bit of an aside. You are very in yourself to speak about these issues. You've had a 47 years of being a Black woman on this earth. How has that changed for you? Were you always so vocal and open and honest about the interactions with people? Has this been something that having breast cancer and being thrown into this realization that statistics are not representing you? Is there some things along the way that have sort of allowed you to be so strong and bold and honest and show up as yourself?
I think I've always been bold and I always told people what I always thought. So I think that, and sometimes I never had a filter and I didn't care. And I was probably a little bit crass because I was younger. And also too, I had a chip on my shoulder because of racism and microaggressions that I faced as well. So I do know that I wasn't happy in a sense because I always had to defend myself. But I didn't understand why I had to defend myself. So growing up in London, I don't really remember my elementary years per se. Well, I kind of remember, but I don't care about that as elementary. That's another story. But high school, I remember being the only Black person, right? Until my sister showed up, right? So I think I learned how to navigate the white world, if that makes sense. So I know how the policies, I could see things in a different light. But then there were times that I was afraid to say anything. And that's probably related to my career because I wanted a job promotion. I wanted to, didn't want to ruffle any feathers if I noticed something. I didn't want to pull the race card, whatever they were saying. And that's ridiculous because I told my students, the race card, you can call the race card if racism's happening, because that means that white person dealt you the race card. So you can pull, if they're playing the game and shuffling and giving you the race card, then you can call it out. So I believe when I was younger, I didn't address the racial element. I just thought, I think I was just more conditioned of trying to assimilate, because I believe that's our Caribbean parents or any parents trying to come to country, trying to assimilate, trying to be part of a new community. And didn't want race to be a barrier, and not being it should be more of an empowerment. So I was very quiet, or I was reserved when microaggressions or when I knew racism was happening directly to me or indirectly. Because I didn't deal with racism with someone yelling the N-word. I didn't deal with race like that piece. I didn't deal with that. I dealt with people trying to use niceness and policy and a rule that kept changing. That's how I got to see it. And I think it was like the last 3-4 years, then I started to acknowledge it even more and I had these conversations with my students even before, because we had as an English teacher, I have already incorporated Black literature and all that stuff. So that wasn't an issue for me. So I was able to talk through that. But I think the last 3-4 years, I think that's where I started becoming tired, and I started to advocate more in the community, in the educational community. such as Banting was the first school that not the first school, we started a POC group and things like that. So I was able to kind of help other students have their voice. And also I had Black students and brown students, Indigenous students coming up to me and says, how do you handle this? How do you do this? How do this? And then so it's like, oh my gosh, do I need to create a to-do list or a reaction? I said, I had 40 something years to understand how to, you know, clap back kind of stuff, whatever. So, but I think what happened the last 2-3 years is that I feel like then that's when I started to acknowledge it. And then having breast cancer, and, you know, that's when you start looking at, you know, mortality and looking about your life and how do you want to be remembered, and taking risk. And I'm not fearful of a white man if I have to question him. I'm not fearful of a white woman if I have to question her. I don't care anymore. I'm not even fear of a Black man thinking that I should be acting a certain way, or Black other members in the community think I should be a certain way. I don't care. This is my story, my journey, my experiences. And all I can think is that can my experiences, my voice help somebody, an inkling, just an idea, just a little spark for somebody else to advocate, to think on their own, to start earlier than what I've started. So that's what I hope. And I think that's what I don't know. I think that's what I'm doing right now.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, I mean, that kind of, it brings up what you're doing with the BIPOC Education Association for me, right? And can you share with us sort of like, you know, what you're hoping that will create and what that is for you? Because there's a lot there. I mean, I honestly don't know how you keep up with that. I have so many saved posts. I'm gonna have to take like 3 weeks off to catch up with them. Can you share a little bit about like why you started that, how it's evolving for you, and sort of what you're hoping the future of it will bring?
Why I started a group. As an educator, in the school board, there's only a handful of Black educators. So when we always talk about, oh, we need Black and brown spaces, well, it's great, but if there's only a handful, I can't really do anything with Black and brown spaces because I'm not going to involve, and it's hard, and what have you. And like I said, 95% of teachers are white. They're the ones in the trenches. They're going to make the difference. Whether I talk to them today, hopefully they just change something the next day and support their students or a student or what have you to check their bias. So the reason I created it was more or less where I was sitting at the table at the board. So I do work at the board office as an educational ESL learning coordinator. And I did have an opportunity of sitting at the table with other educators, and they all had good intentions of wanting to do something, support the Black community, especially after, you know, the George Floyd incident. And then everybody was trying to say they're anti-racist or all this stuff. Everybody was trying to jump on the bandwagon, which is fine. But I noticed there's a lot of performative actions. I'm sorry. There were a lot of performative. And there was a lot of check boxes people were doing. And for me, I need to, again, intentionality versus the impact, right? How are you going to build an impact? How are you going to support the students? And it's not even only the Black students. How are you going to help the white students understand privilege? How are you going to understand fragility? How can they support their student, their peers? How can they actually, what can they call it and acknowledge that? So I just felt that I couldn't do as much with having at the board level, looking at Black racism at that level. Why? Just because I was already focusing on ESL, looking at, you know, marginalized newcomers there. So I just felt like I was pulled in too many directions, right? I can't save everybody. I'm trying to save myself. So then I just had to create a boundary. So when I work with the board, I'm looking at ESL, looking at literacy, looking at culture responsive, looking at elements that I can support teachers. Then when I create a BIPOC, then I can talk about race. Then I don't have to have a filter. This is me, this is what I'm doing, and this is my journey as a student, my journey as an educator, my journey as a mom, and what have you. So I created BIPOC thinking that it was just gonna be like 30, 40 people just talk and share ideas and everything else. Then it just grew and grew, and I'm really happy how it's turning out. I create the group just for other people to talk, for white people, white educators, students to talk. And initially it was for BIPOC students, BIPOC students, and white students, allies, because again, I don't want to segregate. I need everybody to talk about it and be on the table. And young white students are more ready or more engaged and understand and ask the questions more than, you know, the adults as well. Just saying. So shout out to the young kids who were challenging the status quo. And yeah, so then I just created that, and then it's a strict private group. I create the units and I post the articles. I do have a colleague, Leslie Henry. She helps and submit some work as well, because sometimes I'm not available. So she'll take the reign and go from there. And the reason I'm the only one that posts the articles is because when I had it open for other people, again, intentions. Then I have white women putting articles that just perpetuate systemic racism, that were a little bit ignorant. I just like, oh, what are you doing, right? And they're thinking, and they're just throwing it on there and then leaving and not even looking at what they're putting out there. So again, all my posts, as you probably seen, all my articles are very intentional. You can see how it's kind of like in my classroom. It's kind of like, I'll give you some good articles, feel good articles, and then bam, I'll give you something else, right? And you can see, and then, and it's great because I have a lot of white educators who will send me, you know, direct messages stating that they're not going to say anything, they're not going to comment, but they're learning. And that's all, again, this is everyone's learning journey, learning and unlearning. I don't want people to feel like they have to defend themselves. And again, it's just having that dialogue and having educators reflect. So again, it's just there for everybody. And where do I want it to go in the future? I don't know. It's something where, do I do workshops with educators? Do I do workshops with students? Do some team? Do I come as a writer to help look at people's lessons? There's so many ways I can do it. It's just, what am I passionate about? Because I'm doing things I'm passionate about. I'm not doing things because I have to. What am I passionate about? And what will have a huge impact and build capacity and make a difference? So those are the things. So I'm not too sure where it's going. But I do know that I definitely want to do more Zoom sessions as I did in February for Black History Month, but also look about doing some workshops to support educators, such as even like the books that they select, or addressing the only Black kid in the room, or reflecting on teachers college when we become educators, that element, because again, we weren't taught all this stuff specifically.
That was a lot.
I know. That was a lot.
Yeah, I'm trying to trail back all the questions that came up as you were going, but yeah,
that's why I said don't wait to the end. Don't wait to the end.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question on the tip of their tongue?
Just, yeah, go ahead. I like this.
I'm interested about, you know, I think your words were, I don't want to segregate. We can't have that. And it made me think a lot about this question that white people come to me with a lot when they see me post these things, and they're trying to navigate whether they think I'm overreacting because they don't recognize what world we live in, or they're curious to explore, or they are now experiencing white guilt. But the thing that comes up is this fear of acting in any way. They don't want to say something because they're being told to shut up and let Black people speak. And they don't want to say nothing because they're also told, stop being silent, right? White silence is violence. And so I think, you know, I know that you've thought through the importance of us all having these conversations together. And so I don't necessarily have a question. I just, you know, Melissa, story time. Can you tell me a little bit more about your own coming to understanding, or what you're seeing about the importance of us having these conversations together and not isolated? Because again, I know you stated like this is your opinion and your way coming to it, but some people say, you know, white people should be talking to white people, and, you know, let Black people just fucking live their life. And so, yeah, if you just, maybe if there's anything you want to kind of shed light on there about the importance of us all kind of working in the space together.
Well, again, it's my opinion. And it's from my lived experiences. So just, but again, I've been an educator for 22 years, majority of here in Canada. guess who all my students were? 99% were white. And what did I do? Did I still get them to read Emmett Till? Yep. Did they still read poetry by Claude McKay? Yep. Did they still read a poem by Langston Hughes? Yep. So I'm just saying, so here I am teaching Black, literature, because again, English teacher, giving them exposure to different elements through history and everything else. And representation of just not having canon texts and just not having a book written by a white man about a white boy trying to do something. I was able to shape young minds, and a lot of those white students, they're allies today. So a lot of them are in BIPOC. A lot of them support me on the Black History Month Zoom sessions. A lot of them were featured guests. So again, it shows me as a Black woman, build relationships with young white students in London, which is very white and conservative. They even mentioned they had parents who had a different mindset than what they've had, and felt comfortable in sharing that with me because I built the relationships. And now they're like 25, 28 and still having those relationships. And now they're allies and they're coming back to me. And even too, when the George Floyd incident happened, a lot of my past students follow me on Instagram, and some students from all around the world or other school boards were like, well, why didn't we learn anything about Black history? Why didn't we learn anything in class, in English class? Why didn't we read? And then I was so proud because all my white students were like, well, we did, we did. And it goes to show that. So I do agree that Black and brown voices should get together, be at the table to figure out what they want. Because again, everyone's experiences are different because again, you don't have one white person representing all white people. Every white person has their own individual ideas. So it's hard to put all Black people together in a sense, because again, everyone comes with their own cultural piece, ethnic piece, and experiences. So again, it's like having me sitting at a table of Black and brown people. Yes, it's because we have the same ideas and a goal that we want to have in mind, but we're all going to, but the intersectionality piece is where it's going to, alter people's discussions or perspectives. So, and do I feel comfortable? And again, what did I just said earlier? I said that I grew up in a white society. I know how it works. So again, it's having those conversations, and I'm okay challenging white educators or white, and even too, my students, I challenge them. I always give them good questions. So for me, it's just my experience, what I had. And again, also too, is that sometimes white teachers or white people just don't know. And I even had this question, like if white people don't even have, and I know you don't have a Black friend because whatever, that Black friend doesn't represent everything, but if white people are only in their white world, how are they going to learn if they don't have any questions, or how can they articulate by talking to someone or people in the Black world? But again, how can we have that piece where we're both trying to learn from each side and both perspectives? And again, it's also looking at it like, I feel like white people, again, like what I mentioned earlier when we started, I think is we're conditioned, we're in a system that we did not unpack. Now we're unpacking. Now we're like, wait a minute. Like a lot of you guys are going back with your friends that you had, your one Black friend or Black kids in school. Now you're gonna go back and say, how are they treated? Oh my God, I remember that language. How are they doing today? So I want you to go back and start thinking, because now you're gonna see things differently, not just with your white lens, white focus, and ignoring that. And also too, is that when we grew up, we were talking about not seeing color. Well, that's ignorant. Then we're also saying the word was equality. But that's wrong, because equality doesn't mean anything. It's equity, because everyone's different. If it's equality, then no one is it's a disadvantage. So that is my perspective about having BIPOC and allies, because I personally did not want to leave all the wonderful relationships I built with my past students who were waking up 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever, that are doing amazing stuff today and still having those questions and still pushing the envelope and still supporting me. And I was their only Black educator. So that even says a lot as well. So that is why my way of doing it, to have the A, because I didn't want to leave those students. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Remarkable. They are so lucky. Questions from anyone about anything that kind of came up there? Yeah, Natalie.
So I have, oh man, I learned so much. So this is something you said at the beginning, and so I've been out of like high school for a while now, and I'm just curious, and I know that, and it's funny because when I think about my own high school experience, I think I maybe thought I was an ally, but I probably wasn't exactly an ally. Like not actually putting in the work and seeing things the way that they should have been seen. So I'm wondering what actually is going on. What's going on now? You said that what's going on now is the same thing as what was going on 15 years ago. What's the lay of the land? I know it sounds like a vague question, but.
Well, I'm just going by voices from students. This is from the meetings and the sessions from BIPOCA. We had I also did some live discussions and interviews, and it's posted on Instagram, some live discussions there. But it was like some of the Black students were saying how they were being, their dress code was, they were being picked on about their dress code compared to the other students. How if they were being suspended, they were being suspended more than another student. And then even white students were saying, yeah, I did the same thing and I just got, slap on the wrist, and then my buddy, got suspended. So they even knew, kids are not stupid. They know exactly what's going on and they see it. And these are students who are telling me this and sharing this information with me. As an English teacher too, the canon text, like why are we still teaching books from like 40, 50, 60 years ago, right? And again, we have to look at the mindset. What books you liked back then as a young white boy and a white girl did not even resonate with me as a young Black girl or you know what I mean? So again, we just have to look about the choices that we're making. So also too, like the curriculum, the information, the textbooks being whitewashed. Teachers are apprehensive of teaching Black history or whatever because they're apprehensive of saying the wrong thing. And this is what I say. I'd rather you say the wrong thing than not say anything at all. Because if you're not saying anything, you're pretending Black people didn't exist, problems didn't exist, racism doesn't exist. And I'm tired of people being uncomfortable or adults being uncomfortable by talking about it. But then all these Black kids and Indigenous kids are uncomfortable all the damn time. By when they walk into a store, they're uncomfortable because they're going to be looked at. When they walk in the hall, a teacher probably said something that had some form of microaggression. So those elements there that they're going to see, or the kids' parents had dealt with microaggression they got to see, and then they're taking it with them, that burden. So that's a piece where I think that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. And I believe a lot of teachers are trying their best and doing their best on what they can. But again, now teachers are overworked because I know they are overworked. You have 30-something kids in their classroom. Their teachers are trying to get things done. They're making accommodations. Students are on an IEP, the mental health. So you have all this. Now you're looking at the racial piece. And then teachers haven't been trained to look at the racial lens. When I went to teachers college, it's like, this is literature, this is whatever, here's some strategies, here's some things, here's the forms of assessments. That's basically it. Not saying when you assess, think about ways you can assess that you can meet the needs of students. If you're picking literature, look at the demographic and feel comfortable to know the demographic before you teach it, not make assumptions. So again, it's just like, I think everybody now has to unpack, such as the Ministry of Education needs to unpack. Teachers College needs to unpack. Our school system needs to unpack. And then again, I'm not going to just leave it at the educators, because teachers are doing a lot, and kudos to them. And it's just, again, the lack of PD. As I know now, because of money, the cutbacks, everything else, no, it's very hard to do PD. That's a professional development. So if you don't have the opportunity to do PD, then that's hard. Then also to the time away from your classroom, that's also hard. So we just need to go back to giving an opportunity to teachers to learn themselves. And still, teachers became teachers because they love learning, they love teaching, and they love to grow. But then become stagnant because they don't have that time to grow. So that's another element we need to look at as well. And one more thing is that also principals and superintendents, they need to wake up. Because again, principals and superintendents, they haven't been in the classroom in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They're back into the old school status quo. So they're not gonna have any lens. They're gonna remember the lens, what happened in the 70s or 80s or early 90s, and think those things are okay and still continue, and not look at it a lens when they walk into the school. they're not going to be looking at it in a different lens. So again, those elements that we need to look at. Even too, dress codes, that's another element. We have dress codes from 1960 still being applicable today, right? There's a lot of assumptions about the do-rag. Oh, you can't wear a do-rag because that's gang affiliated. No, that was from the 90s and people are making it gang affiliated. But if you look at the culture, kids wear do-rags. I wear a do-rag when I'm getting my hair done or what have you, because we wear scarves and everything else because we're in hair transition. Our hair is different. It's a transitional piece. Like if my daughter got her hair unbraided, it's crazy. If I don't have time to work on it that night, then we just the head wrap in a scarf. So again, people need to stop making assumptions of what they see on social media or no, on media itself, and make that assumption that a kid in London, Ontario is a gang affiliated. Meanwhile, the kid is in grade 9 trying to figure out who he is as a Black student or a Black young man. Why is a white person making these judgments and putting that person in a box? So again, this is again, it's a system that people know that there's a problem now. So that's what's happening now. People are aware. They're aware there's a problem. It's like, where and how do we go? Now, for that, how do we go? If you don't have, for the curriculum, if you don't have Black or brown or Indigenous people at the table to write, then shit's still gonna happen, right? If you don't have Black educators coming in the classroom teaching, then that's a problem. And again, it's a problem today because again, there's only 95% are white and 5% of teachers of color in various school boards. And also too, statistics also show that a lot of Black students are going to applied classes, which is fine, and going to college, which is fine. But again, options for them have been stripped by half. And that means that a lot of them now can't go into education. You teach us college, you gotta go to university, you gotta get a degree and everything else, which that should be questionable. Do you really need a degree? That's another thing. To become a teacher, just thinking, because I know there's a lot of college level students who have trades and everything else and be doing just as well than just talking about theory of education. So anyways, that's another tangent. So those are the things that we need to look at. It's a system. It is a system. And I think I just covered all of those.
It was a lot, but that was good. That was really
my
good.
rant. I do my rants.
It was thorough.
Thank you.
Can I jump in with another question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, Melissa, we keep having this conversation like with the circle of people that I'm with. And again, I work for the public school board. So the amount of work and expectation that is being put on Black and brown and Indigenous bodies right now, because everyone's jumped on this bandwagon, they are being pulled in and asked to represent and do every single thing. So the people that are already walking out the door every day and face racism and microaggressions and like have that battle every single day of their life are now being asked to do all the work to change the system, and whatever that looks like within the white system, but change the system and help move that forward. And again, there's yes, the people need to be at the table, but they're also, I'm going off on a tangent myself here, I apologize everyone, but Dolores Mullings, Professor Dolores Mulling, Dr. Dolores Mulling, she said something last week in a webinar that I was in about token hiring of white people. So hiring white people that are there to do the job and do the job right and support and have allyship. What are your thoughts on finding a balance with that, of pulling in white people that are in allyship, but also having representation of Black and brown bodies without overexertion? Sorry, that was a big one.
That's why I removed myself to do any of the Black type of writing over the summer. I didn't want to do it because, like I said, I created a boundary. You know, there were some things I didn't get because I was Black. Now you want to get this because I'm Black? Not happening. Okay. And I've also, and again, it's having Black people come to write everything doesn't mean anything because the white people are not going to apply it. It's performative. And the reason I can say that is because I've met with generations of Black teachers who have retired, and they were part of a writing panel. They did some crazy, wonderful resources. and it wasn't popular. It wasn't seen. It was, again, it's that performative. And it's like passing the buck, because again, how are black people or educators or students shouldn't be teaching white people all the information. I think it's a guide to teach and guide them to make sure they're on the right path. I don't want them to be on the wrong path and still cause issues for other people, other students. So I do believe that there's a balance. I do believe, like, if there's a white ally who did research with, systemic racism, understands that, then yes. But if that white person is coming in as a white savior and a know-it-all, and then negates the voices of the black people who didn't, like, I have all the different degrees, but I don't have a degree in racism, systemic racism, because, there wasn't really popular or what have you, or social justice piece. So am I not going to be listened to because my lived experiences are not valuable or not equitable or not equal to that? So I think it's more or less how that information, like, you're bringing in the theory, you're bringing in the history, the research, then you bring the lived experiences, and then how do you navigate that as well? So I think is a balance, but again, I don't think there should be all black people teaching white folks, because that's ridiculous. And white people don't really listen. White people are not going to listen. It's 2021. They're starting to listen now. And why are we putting that? And it's that whole thing of black mental exhaustion as well. So it's a thing, is where can people go, and what are you writing, and what are your workshops for? And so I think there's a balance, but I disagree by getting all the black people to write everything. And then nothing happens, and I have seen it. So that's why I wouldn't want to be part of a writing, because where is it going to go? And do I have control do the black people who are writing, do they have control of how that information is shared? Because a lot of times the blacks will write, and then the whites will perform, and then they will edit and revise and revise and revise, and then it disappears. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And then I'm going to jump in with a follow-up question, kind of. So again, with all the talk about anti-Black racism and eradicating that, is there ever, so I'm a big proponent of calling out white supremacy, right? So our systems are all built on white supremacy. We are not having that part, and I mean we as in, again, I'm the education lens. We are never bringing that to the table or having that yeah, good book. Yeah. Oh, I haven't. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like,
oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. This is a good one. I'm liking this one.
What is it?
It's called Black Exhaustion, Karens, and Other Threats to Black Lives and Well-Being.
Okay.
Oh, this one's hard to read for me though. This is triggering a lot for me. This is, I definitely need a black and brown space for this one. Because I would just get all riled up. Okay, go back to you. Okay, what are you saying? Yeah, white supremacy.
Like that part is always missing from the conversation, right? Like racism is a white person's problem. We're the ones who created it. We're the ones that are perpetuating it, but it is never the conversation that is happening. It's like, how can we end racism? Okay, let's get the black people at the table, right? Like that whole side of that is constantly missing. And I don't know. I guess I
know why. Well, first of all, think about it. No one wanted to talk white people didn't want to talk about racism, right? They don't want to talk about it. And like I said, when I had an interview, the interviewer was asking me, it's like, is it okay if I call you black, a woman with cancer? I was like, yeah. Like, why are we whispering the word black? So again, we've been conditioned to not to talk about black, race, or what have you. We're conditioned not to talk about any of that information. Now you want to ask the white people to talk about white supremacy culture. Oh Lord, because what's the first thing when you think about white supremacy? You think the KKK, you think the Burning Cross, you think of lynching, we think of all of that. So it's kind of like the idea of the white supremacy has this image of explicit, abrasive racism, right? Like racist or whatever. But we know in Canada, yes, we may not, I know there might be abrasive and everything else, but there's a lot of implicit system racism that's happening in rules. And this is where we have to be mindful of. Like, we need to look at the history. When slaves were released and, free and everything else, then that's when jail started to happen. There wasn't all these jails and everything else or what have you, because white people at that time made all these rules and policies for Black people not to be successful. So they get, again, it's like change. It's like being in a relationship and your partner keeps changing the rules. Yes, we're gonna have dinner today. No, we're not doing this. No, this is whatever. That's what it is. It's like there's all these different rules that keeps changing. So again, and the rules were only for Black people. So they made a way to change the rules that would benefit for some and not all. So again, so we look at I think that's where we have to look about white supremacy and how it started with the, you know, with the slavery, with that, and how the government was part of it. Because again, we have to be understanding with the white supremacy culture of that time, with, you know, Ku Klux Klan, all those people were in professional jobs. We're trying to say some of them were doctors, lawyers, you know, what have you. And and they were able to make those decisions, and then part of the government. So again, that's where we need to address it. And people don't want to be associated with that because no one wants to be called racist. No one wants to be called racist. But then, okay, that's fine. I know you don't want to be called racist because you want to be inclusive. You want to be the right person. But again, you have to understand that there's racial acts happening. Implicit, there's microaggressions happening. So how can we talk about it? And also too, when we're talking about racism, not to take it so personally, also when we're talking about white supremacy culture, we got to look at it as a whole, how we were conditioned, what we were taught, because if we don't know better, we can't do better. So now when people are unpacking, they're like, damn, I didn't learn anything about residential schools. That's bullshit. Wait a minute. I only learned stuff about, in Canada, I only learned about Black slavery. I didn't know anything about, that's bullshit. So again, we need to start unpacking. It's like, why is this happening? Okay, this and this and this. Let's just address it. This and this and this. We have to address that. That's the culture. That's what's created. But it also seeped into the policies and the procedures and the rules and generational wealth. So it's you know, it's baby steps. And again, is that whole idea of white fragility. You know what I mean? People don't want to address it. So then a lot of times you don't say white supremacy culture, you find other ways to say it. So we'll talk about implicit rules, policies for some. I know that's what I have to do. You know, it's kind of like, it's the bait and switch kind of do that, right? And then when people see that, then they go, oh, that is an example of white supremacy, because people are so white people are so defensive because again, they don't want to look racist. They don't want to be wrong, or they're just tired, or they don't understand the concept. So how do we help people have the concept? And again, it's just people just need to look at history in a lens of Black and white or of different races, about how rules apply to some and why were rules changed, right? For some and not all.
Who was always in control of those rules and still are, right? Like history, yes, but has it changed? No. So yes, let's keep working at it and calling it out and doing what, yeah.
And then that's also goes though, then you're talking about a lot of white men, right? Older white men and young white men. So if young white men are getting in, are they woke, or are they just basically in their own world because they got conditioned of privilege and, you know, not always having to be accountable for things, right? So that's another element. And then even when you get white women at the table, is white women representing white women, or are they also representing Black women? Which we also know that's not the case with white feminism, and also how that works as well, right? So again, we always want to say white women, we say white women are also being supportive. Yeah, but they're supportive to a certain degree. We also have to understand the history of feminism, because again, there is some issues with that. There's history. There's a good article that I posted on BIPOCA that, you know, got some traction, as well as white women. The first thing you look at is say white. Women are white first before they're women. I'm sorry, right? So even to look at the states, a lot of white women voted for Trump because what? Because of whatever, right? So again, white first, then female, right? That's what happens. So they gravitate, that's their default, and then go from there. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot of things there, but there's, you know, some things that I want to make sure that we talk about that might be timely. And so one of the things I hope we're not talking about a year from now is COVID, but we are today very much in that space. And I'm wondering from your own perspective, you know, whether it's like related to healthcare, whether it's related to our, you know, our white-centric approach to dealing with the pandemic. What are some things that white people might not be seeing as it relates to the experience of any non-white person through this pandemic. And again, that can be your own experience, maybe some conversations you've had or things you've witnessed, and it might be very different in Canada and the States, or not at all. Just wondering what kind of things kind of come up.
Well, I definitely read some articles, and there is research that shows that people of color are the ones being impacted with COVID. And I believe that's because of the socioeconomic. I think is a lot of our essential workers working in jobs that they don't have the privilege or the opportunity to take time off or work from or work remote and what have you. So again, I think that element there of why you see, you know, the prevalent of, you know, Black, and especially in Toronto, you're hearing that a lot of, that's a huge element, and also students as well. So I think it's also again, part of systemic racism, generational wealth, and newcomers and everybody else starting all over again and trying to find their path, the land of opportunity, so to speak. So I believe it's a little bit of the socioeconomic piece, and it relates to race and everything else. I just feel like for the sick days, that I know that's a controversial topic, is like, if you have people working minimum wage or, you know, trying to make ends meet, and then they have to go to work, then they catch COVID, and then they go home, and then they're losing money, they're not able to pay, you know, their bills and livelihood, or maintain their livelihood, that they're already trying to barely, you know, be successful anyway. So those are the things that we need to be mindful of the intersectionality of wealth. I think that's another element as well. But for me, I've been sheltered because I had to be stuck at home, and I have the privilege and middle class. I think that's a little bit different for me, but I do have read how it is hard for, if I was a young mom and had to work at the mall or how to do whatever, and then I'm off for a month, how am I, again, it's that socioeconomic piece that we need to look at. But then that also ties into education. If we're putting all the Black and brown kids in applied or whatever, or they're dropping out of school because they don't feel accepted, then we're going to continue this whole idea of poverty and what have you.
Great, thank you. If someone has a question but they're not comfortable speaking, you're welcome to put it in the chat. Before we move on to anything else, does anyone have a question that they want to say or text? Okay. Someone else is just joining us. Part of this conversation and these monthly gatherings is the action piece, is going away from this, not just understanding more or knowing more, but doing better. And, you know, just looking at some of the people here tonight, some I don't know. So we might all have different walks of life. Some of us might be parents, some of us might be students, some of us might be teachers or leaders, or just people who want to know better or do better. Is there something that you want to call us to do? You have our attention. We'll do anything. What is something that you think, you know, if everyone did this, no matter how small or how bold or courageous or whatever it is, you would start to see some transfer?
I believe okay, so white people or white allies or what have you needs to read more. So I think you have to read and know the history and start looking at things in a different light and check that. So I think it's learning about the past and making and looking at things in an equitable way, and how things were not equitable for people of color, for Black, especially for Black people and Indigenous or whomever. An opportunity to reflect about your own bias and the assumptions, and look at your own family, like how you were raised and how you were influenced, because that's another element too. And again, we're looking at the generation of what was the mindset when your parents were growing up, that you heard this term or heard this or thinking about this, and is this still continuing it, and how can you change that perspective and be inclusive? And the reason I brought that up is because I remember I had a few students, white students, and they were having challenges with parents having a different perspective than what they had as an allyship. So again, how to navigate that. And when you are in a room and you see a person of color and anything else, just start to observe how other people treat and react to that person. Don't just look up and say, okay, whatever. Start to kind of look around the room and see how people are interacting, because you're going to see that this will be explicitly shown, or indirectly or directly, you'll see that as well. And another one is when you see some learn what microaggression is. Start, again, do the reading, and start to become, there's a huge list of all the different microaggressions, but because you might even be a part of it as well, subconsciously, or not aware of it. But now start calling people out when they're doing it. Have that question. No, I don't want you to go around, you're racist, and I don't want that. Just more or less say, why are you saying that? Where do you know how that makes you sound? Or do you know the history of that? Or that makes me feel uncomfortable. Or do you know what you look like when you say something like that? So start doing that, because then other people start to be mindful of what they're saying, and then also give them an opportunity for them to learn or realize what they're doing. And some people may not even care. They'll probably not care and continue doing it. And then you need to understand if those are the people you want to be around, or and have a conversation about that. So is internal, a lot of reflection, reading, observing your environment, and also, being a silent ally to a person who is not white in your group, such as your school, your classroom, or what have you. You need to look at that person, because you see color. So then you got to see what challenges that person of color may have had or is having in your environment that you are supporting. Start thinking about that as well. And still having the conversations. That's basically it. And then whatever rules and policies, start questioning policies. Just start asking questions. Why are we doing this? Why do we have this? Why is this policy? Because people don't know. They're just like, well, that's the way it always been. Well, and if it's always been, then there will be slavery. If it's always been there, then it'll be residential schools. If it's always been there, then women would be still in the kitchen and we wouldn't be voting. So think about that. So again, just start asking, why do we even do this? Because I think people don't have time to think about why, because we're just human beings in this world. Go, don't have to think, just keep going, right? So now when you start asking why, like even too, when I look at the dress code, why can't students wear hats? What's the big deal? Why are you worried about seeing a girl's bra strap? Like, you don't want her to wear a bra, so what do you want? Like all these questions and everything else, and have conversations. So I think I don't have one way. I just kind of gave a little bit of suggestions to see where people's readiness are, Jenna. That's what I did. So one size doesn't fit all, but I hope that helps you.
That's such a good point. And I think just even the last sentence there about like where everyone's readiness is at. And I think even the reading and educating yourself. I've read books again that I read 3 years ago when I was like, okay, you got to start doing the work. And it's a different book to me now, because I've started to, well, first you read it and you're like, this is the world I live in. Then you start living in that world and you start to observe. But then going back and reading it, it's like there's so many other little bits that are in there. And so I think that, that the point of like where you're ready at to learn, right? And for some people that might be starting with their family or themselves or their school, right? There's no shortage of places in this world to observe from that lens. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. The last question I have, Natalie, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just waiting to see if anybody else had a question. But I do, and actually, this is a bit of a. You haven't mentioned this yet in your talk, but this is so. Tell me if you're like, I don't really want to answer this, but I've been thinking a lot about cultural appropriation lately. And
pardon me? Pardon?
Cultural appropriation. And
okay.
Specifically, like cultural appropriation of
your mic.
Your mic's a bit fuzzy.
Okay.
Is this? I think maybe.
Yeah, you good. Yeah.
So specifically, cultural appropriation of what's called Black vernacular English. So that might, that's some terms like that's lit or that's fire or something like that. So I've been reading articles about it, and I mean, just to say personally, for me, the conclusion I've come is I realized I was so blind to this before, but I realized that's not something that I want to be ever like appropriating. But I was wondering, I did also see that the opinions are varied among that, so I wanted to hear your opinion about that.
So are you talking about slang?
Yes, yeah, like yeah, some sort of slang, yeah, slang, yeah.
So the word lit and swag.
So I think Natalie, let me know if this is right. When white people use
yes,
Black people's language or their version of English as white people, and again, I don't know how to like properly, but it's almost like when white people might be like, yo, Omi, like when white people try to talk like what they think Black people sound like.
Oh, okay. Well, that's disrespectful, so you don't do that. Because that's ignorant, thinking that, all Black people talk like that. So that piece. But again, I have to go back to what students are listening to. They're listening to a lot of hip hop and what have you. So a lot of students already now know they don't say the N word. I'm not going to talk about that, whatever, but everybody kind of knows about that, like, that piece. But if kids are, I don't know, I think this is more of a younger generation. If they're having conversations and there's the whole talk about vernacular, that's an element that's in language, in music, and it resonates in things that they're watching, social media and what have you. So when kids are using it, I don't see it as a way of cultural appropriation or what have you. However, that's just for me, because again, they're words. They're, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like, I don't know. I just think it's words. I think it's more or less if they're trying to mimic I think it's the idea of trying to mimic a culture and trying to pretend whatever. I think that's where people start to question that. But I think that's where whoever is white but again, if a white person is in part of a Black culture, there is a lot of that happens, right? Then there's a relationship and element there too. So again, if the white kid is growing up in a Black world, so to speak, that kid should not be questioned to not be because of the color of their skin, because again, that's a culture that they're having in that as well. So someone says, I see this a lot on Instagram, there's a Black reaction girl just to make a point. Oh, yeah, and I understand that an element of the gist of the Black girl reaction and what have you, and people are questioning what that is. So I'm conflicted in that one. But I don't know, like when I was growing up too, we had, it was Vanilla Ice back in the day. Quiet, please. There was Vanilla Ice back in the day, and he was doing his stuff, and no one really questioned that. Everyone's like doing their thing, right? Beastie Boys were doing their thing. So I don't know. I just feel like I think it's just an element of, I think it's not cut and dry, but I also believe that words should not be prevented unless it's something like racial, what have you. That's where I'm at right now. Because I know I had some students that would talk Black or say a couple words that were part of a Black culture, but that was just that's just an informal colloquial language that people are talking that we add. Like, you know what I mean? Like back in the day, it was like word up. Everybody used to say that word, like, you know what I mean? So again, it's just like, how far do you go? I don't know. I know everybody may have different opinions, but that's where I am. And also too, you're coming from an English teacher that's looking at words and writing. So am I going to allow, if my students are writing an essay or writing something of a character, and then I want the students to white students to incorporate Black kids, people in their writing or different perspectives, then I want them to think about different ways that they can have, like not have the stereotype, but also show different elements as well. So they need to learn how, I think it's just different perspectives. That's a hard one, but yeah, that's where I'm at right now. That's hard with me growing up and seeing that. But, and again, I'm not going to tell a student, and as an educator, I'm not going to tell a student not to say, this is lit, Miss Allder. Well, then, yeah, at least they're telling me that what they're thinking. There's not like, it's not a black word. I don't look at this Miss Alder. I love your swag. If the student's telling me that, I'm not gonna be like, don't say that. That's black. I don't know. For me, that's hard for me to say that because I'm building relationships. They're giving me compliments. What are they saying? The content. What are they actually saying? The meaning of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that from what I've been reading, most of I think like the complexity of it, definitely I think that's a part of it, and that'll always be a part of it. So, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. I just don't like when a white person tries to address me like yo, 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 or who makes assumptions that I speak black, because, you know, or whatever black is, or you know, or try to act Jamaican or what have you with the Wakwan or something, you know what I mean? Like, I don't like that stuff because that seems ignorant and you're making a preconceived notion of who I am. So that's a part that I have an issue with when you're addressing, right? Especially if you don't know the person, right? Any other questions or any comments that I missed, Jenna?
I would like to know, where does hope lie in all of this for you? Let's end with hope and see what kind of hope you're feeling or seeing.
Okay, hope. I know, I'm trying to think again. The hope that I see is the young generation are getting it. So eventually every generation is going to evolve. The stuff is just really, it's so intriguing how young white students are recognizing and addressing and calling things out. It's amazing where now young Black students are calling things out and not hiding and not shielding and being empowered. So I think I love the idea of the younger generation, Black generation, being empowered, not shying away from your Blackness, embracing it. And again, Blackness goes in all different directions. Like, you don't have to be the stereotypical whatever. You can make it who you are and accept it and embrace it. And so that's the element there of hope that I'm seeing, and I'm seeing more of that. And also to the younger generation are open to having these conversations. So again, they're going to be our future doctors, lawyers, or politicians, what have you. So hopefully from these engaging conversations, it's still slowly going to change and evolve. So that's my hope, is that the next generation who are talking about social justice, who are trying to be allies, everything else, are calling out white friends who are not allies or performative, and then supporting their friends of color who is being treated unfairly. So I think it's just I think the younger generation are not really becoming bystanders. They're learning a lot and acknowledging it, a lot of it. So that's my hope, is the next generation. This generation, we just need, I don't know, this generation, it's like, there's a huge shift that needs to happen, and we'll see how that happens. I think you need more people at the table, more voices, opportunity, challenging conversations, unfiltered conversations, and white people not to cry whenever Black people speak up. Stop hiding behind white fragility and white tears to bully Black voices. Because I see a lot, and that's what I've experienced. Remember I said I didn't experience explicit racism?
Yeah.
I experienced implicit racism with the white tears, white fragility, and you know, and try to put me in a stereotype of an angry Black woman. Right? Or being challenged because I am knowledgeable in my field or what have you, right? That's my challenges that I've had.
Yes. Thank you. Is there any other questions before we go? Sometimes silence gets,
I know, everyone's like
something. This is it, now or never. All right, I want to thank you so much, especially given the day that you've had.
Sorry, I know it was a crazy day.
You showed up strong and full of passion and energy and patience. And I'm just so grateful for you, and that I've found you so that I can continue to follow all the work that you share. I appreciate you coming into this space because you had no idea what might come at you, and that's exhausting, I can imagine. So lots of thank yous coming into our chat here. This is recorded, so there's an opportunity to share it in the BIPOC group after as well.
Thank you,
and
thank you.
yeah, wishing you continued success and so much help.
No, thank you for, giving me the opportunity. I hope I was able to, articulate well enough, because I did have a long day and it was draining. And I was like, why? Remember we scheduled March 3rd. I was like, oh, everything's good. I have nothing booked. And then all of a sudden, all the appointments gather. So I just hope everybody's able to take one thing or a couple things away from my conversation and my insight and my opinions and lived experiences. And again, my opinions subject will change once in a while based on what I've learned in having a conversation. Because again, I'm learning, unlearning, we're all doing that, unpacking and acknowledging, a lot of issues that we need to get through. And in talking about it, this is great that we're talking about it, because before no one wanted to talk about anything. Sweep it under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist, but now we're actually calling things out. And if people don't like us calling it out, then they shouldn't be at the table. I love that. That's great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, for being here. Even if you didn't say a thing, it adds value to the conversation to know that other people want to learn. And we all show up with our learning in different ways. So thank you. I hope everyone has a great night. If you are interested in conversations like this, we do have them the first Wednesday of every month. And we also have a book club starting tomorrow on the book Caste. And it looks at the history of the caste system in the world. And it's a different way of looking at racism, an incredible book. You don't even have to read the book to join the discussion. So if you want to be there tomorrow. And yeah, if there's anything that you want to share as well, let us know. Share with Melissa, and if it gets the okay, she'll put it in her group. Exactly. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Natalie. Bye. Thanks, Sinead.
Bye. Thanks, Mel.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, Jenna.